Ended up doing is you ended up getting a lot of people that came in that knew about artillery, and they took over and started training the battalion or the battery, and the battalion for that matter. So you had a lot of changeover. You had a lot of guys that were Pennsylvania Guard officers that wanted promotions, and when they wanted promotions, then they gave it to us to do. The 4 guys that had been to college, and we took the tests, because in the Guard, you took your written test. You didn't have to do anything. All you had to do was write the darn thing out. So we accounted for some good promotions in that outfit.
Let me look at this real quick so I know it.
You didn't see that before?
No, I didn't know. They just handed this to me.
No, I mean you didn't know about that before?
This? No.
Eisenhower put out one of those. Everybody that went on the invasion got one.
Wow. When did you get that?
That's all right. I got several copies. I gave her one.
But when? Before did you get it?
Huh?
When before the invasion did you get it?
Probably just a day or so.
Just about a day?
Yeah.
So, like June 5th?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I went in on D. We got off of Normandy on D+1. Okay. So we were there June 7th, and we landed. First part of the battalion landed that day. The headquarters company landed that day. The rest of us went in the next day, June 8th.
Well, I'm ready when you jump in.
Everything is set up, I think.
Okay.
We're good to go.
Okay.
You want to remember something about an outfit like mine. A Guard outfit is a lot different than a regular outfit. Because in the Guard outfit, everybody knew everybody else, and they had known them for years, and they all worked together before they joined the Guard, and it was all a big, what's his name, get together, you know, weekend stuff. So
I'm going to stop for just a second. Were you rolling whenever we just started?
Yeah.
Before? Okay, great.
We're good to go.
So in the Guard, it wasn't uncommon for the regimental commander to know who I was.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of that, let's back up a little bit and so just for the purposes of the audio tape, tell me your name.
Robert Spaulding.
And the branch of service you were in?
U.S. Army, Field Artillery.
And my name is Deb Haas, and I am here with Mike Green, photographer. Also will help me with the interview, I'm sure. Well, let's talk again. You were mentioning about being in the Guard, and then all of a sudden there was this transformation of what you were planning, I suppose.
Well, the original group that I went in were cavalry, and then shortly before we became activated, they changed them over to field artillery. And that meant that what you had is a bunch of guys who were riding around on horses on weekends, all of a sudden had to learn how to fire artillery pieces. And this was absolutely new to them all. So it was a new experience for everybody.
Can you tell me what that was like for you? I mean, you said it was a new experience.
For me, I didn't get there in time to ride the horses. They had just gotten rid of the last horse when I got there. The artillery, it wasn't bad. I went in, and because they didn't have a battery clerk at the time, I went in and I became a corporal the second day I was in, because they didn't have a battery clerk, and I'd been to college, so I knew what the heck to, you know, I was able to take care of that. So I did that for about the whole time we were in the States, and until we went to Northern Ireland. And then in Northern Ireland, I got out of being the battery clerk and became the vertical control operator in the Fire Direction Center. And at the same time, because I could speak French and German, I was a translator for the S2, and I drove excuse me, I drove the fire direction truck. I was the assistant driver and the top gunner on the fire direction truck. In the pictures that you've got there, there's a picture of the truck, and that 50 caliber up on top of that sucker was mine. And I drove that. In addition, I had a private pilot's license. And in World War II, because they needed observation for the artillery, and the observation planes that the Air Force had were too big, what they started to do was use Piper Cubs. And I had learned to fly in Lock Haven at the Piper Cub factory, so I knew I was a pilot. So I was a civilian pilot. So I got to fly the Cub all the way up until the time of the invasion. And then at the time of the invasion, then they had officer pilots that took over. So I wandered around and did numerous things. I was not just a battery clerk that just did that all by itself.
Tell me some about flying. When you say you wandered around and did some things, tell me about some of those things.
You mean the flying? Well, in the States, I ended up going to the Field Artillery School out of Fort Sill, and I was in the class before Class 1, which is kooky, but that's where it was. The class before Class 1. I was under the impression that if I went there and graduated and became a second Louis, that I could come back and fly with my own outfit. I could not. I found out after I'd been there for about a week. So after I'd been there for a week, I said, I don't want any more of this, and I went back to my own outfit. So that was the end of the flying temporarily in the States. Then when we went overseas, I flew the Cub on and off in England at Devizes. I flew with the 29th Division down at Tidworth. I flew with my outfit over in Bude in Cornwall. So I flew the Cub any time that they wanted me to.
Did you ever meet combat while you were flying?
I only went up twice in combat, and at that time I was not allowed to fly. I went up once over Aachen, and I went once over Rotgen. I didn't enjoy it too much.
Why?
It's a lot tougher than anybody thinks. When we were learning to fly, you were taught how you could fly a Cub and get away from an ME-109. Because what they did is they put Spitfires against us and taught us how to fly against Spitfires. And a Cub is so slow and the fighter plane is so fast that what you did, if you saw him coming, and you better be swiveling your head the whole time you were flying. If you saw him coming, what you did was you turned into him and then stuck your nose down. And he couldn't come down fast enough. His problem was that if he came down to where you were, which was below 500 feet, he was in deep trouble. So they taught us how to do that. We did all kinds of goofy things while we were over there when we were flying.
Goofy things?
Yeah, we'd land on roads and we'd learn how to take off in less than 100 yards. You could take a Cub and land it on a football field, which is one of the advantages of having the Cub. See, this is, whereas, as I told you before, in the regular Army, they had these great big, large aircraft that needed regular runways to land, so they weren't much help to us at all. There was a big fight about whether or not the Air Force was going to let the artillery have Cubs. But it turned out that we ended up with them, whether they liked it or not, because it was a sensible thing to do.
But when you're turning your nose toward him.
Well, when you're turning your nose toward him, he's coming down at you at maybe 300 or 400 miles an hour. You're doing 65, okay? And the difference between his coming down at you and you doing this, he can't gauge it properly. So he's used to fighting somebody that's flying as fast as he is.
Away from him.
Yes. Now he's up against some guy that is only doing 65 miles. They shot Cubs down during the war. There's no question about that. We lost one. But if you kept your head swiveled, well, you could be all right.
So,
And that's why I didn't like it up over Aachen, because Aachen, during the war, when we got to Aachen, they had more anti-aircraft protection around Aachen, ground anti-aircraft protection around Aachen, than they had any place else in the whole European theater. That was the worst as far as anti-aircraft was concerned, ground stuff. I watched them shoot down an Me-109 and a P-51. They came down too low, and they shot them both down. Because when you're doing something like that, you can't differentiate one from the other. And a lot of the Americans, even though they had training in identification, if some airplane's coming at you at 300 or 400 miles an hour, you don't switch from one to the other. You just put it up there and they run into it. That's it.
how hard is it to go back to work the next day after something like that?
Huh?
How hard is it to go back to work the next day after something like that happens? I mean, you know that people are getting shot down, you're going back up. I mean, how hard is that?
For me, it wasn't hard because I was no longer flying, but for the lieutenants, I imagine it was pretty tough. Because that's not the safest thing in the world, flying those little things. Even though you're low on the ground, it still isn't the safest. They've lost a bunch of them.
If we catapult ahead a little bit to the invasion, tell me
Okay.
about your experience. You get this letter from Eisenhower. You know essentially what's coming. Can you give me your mindset then and the people around you?
We were on an LST, and we knew we weren't going in with the infantry, obviously, because heavy artillery didn't go in with the infantry. And heavy artillery, in most instances, they were very careful about them because they didn't want to lose them. Sitting on the LST on June 7th, I was scared to death. We were there that night, and the Germans came over and bombed the invasion fleet. And we didn't sleep inside the LST. Everybody slept up on top because you weren't about to stay down inside. You wanted a chance to get off that thing if anything happened. It was a heck of an experience. Something you just don't forget. A lot easier for me than it was for the guys that I trained with the 29th Division. Because those guys, when they went in, they took their guns in LCIs, and the 111th Field Artillery, which was the outfit I flew with, and the 110th Field Artillery from the 29th Infantry, or the 29th Division, lost all their guns before they even got ashore. They never made it to shore with their guns. We, on the other hand, being heavy artillery, were on an LST. They tried to take us ashore on the 8th, and we tried 3 different times, and they couldn't get the LST in close enough to unload us. So where we should have gone in on Dog Red, we ended up going in on Dog Green, and instead of going all the way in, they sent Rhino ferries out and loaded us off on Rhino ferries, and then we went ashore on Rhino ferries.
What did you see when you got there?
When I got ashore,
What was happening around you?
first thing we did when we got ashore, we were in tandem with a 155 howitzer outfit. They were unloading 2 different sets of Rhino ferries at the time, and we both took the same route up to Colville, Stormare, up onto the cliff so that we could take the waterproofing off. And you'd have our truck, and then you'd have a truck from the other outfit. We didn't lose anybody when we went from the Rhino ferry up to the top of the cliff, but one of those 155 howitzer outfits that was stowing his gun blew up about 5 or 6 trucks behind us. He just had that much more weight than the rest of the trucks did, and they lost him, but we didn't lose any of ours. We got up on the top of the cliff, and what we did is we started to take our waterproofing off. And then, like a bunch of curiosity seekers, we started looking at everything we could see. And there was one place where there had been an 88mm gun emplacement, and apparently the batteries and the battleships had just, they had hit that thing, and all of those guys were dead around the 88, but they had no marks on them. They were killed by concussion from the shells from the battleships and on the invasion fleet. That and a lot of dead bodies lying around. When I shacked in that night, I slept alongside of a hedgerow, and there was I guess there was a dead 1st Infantryman about 5 feet away from me. And it was like that with everybody. Because, you know, this was only the 2nd day, 3rd day. And they didn't have time to come back and pick these guys up. It was kind of scary. But being in the artillery is a lot more fortunate the guys are in the infantry, that's for sure.
What happened after that? Days go by. What did you do?
We moved up and got into the first firing positions, and we set up the Fire Direction Center. And we began to fire for the 29th Division and for the 1st Infantry Division. And we fired for the British 7th Army Division, which was on our left. So our guns could fire about 15 miles. 155s at that time could fire that far. So we did a lot of preparation fire out in front of everybody else. And that's what we did.
How long after that did you come home?
Did I come home? A year, 11 months.
So in that time, what did you do? In that other 11 months?
Well, I guess we went all the way across France. We went through Luxembourg and Belgium and to Germany, then back down to Czechoslovakia, which is where I ended up at the end of the war. In between, I ended up getting married.
How old were you then?
27. I was kind of old. The majority of the guys weren't that old.
You know, at 27, or through their whole lives, most people would never see, let alone sleep near, you know, dead bodies. Do you think, can you put in a perspective for me, you know, you survived this, you're next to people that didn't. Can you explain to me what that's like?
For me, I just felt I was very lucky. Very lucky that I wasn't in the infantry and that I was in the field artillery. And also very lucky that I stayed with the guard outfit. I stayed with the guard outfit the whole time. I went off and did odd things, but I came back to the outfit all the time. I don't know. There were times when you saw stuff that really turned your stomach. There was one time when we were moving up, and we weren't too doggone far behind the darn infantry because they tried to keep us moving up all the time. And you would come on a tank that was still burning, and the dead bodies would be hanging out the doggone tank, and the smell was something terrific. And in this one instance, we went through a town, and you'd come around, take a turn, and in this one particular instant, we just kept running over this German. He was lying in the street, and there wasn't a thing he could do about it, and he was just as flat as a pancake. And every truck just went right over him. Nobody stopped. Nobody did anything. And that was something that kind of turned your stomach a little bit. But then, you know, once the guy was dead, he didn't know what had happened to him. But even so, it still turned your stomach. We went through to go back, we went through the Filet Pocket. We went through Paris. We stopped and had a period where the infantry and the tanks had gotten so far out in front that they didn't have supplies, and then that's when they organized the Red Bull Express, if you've ever heard about that. So what they did is they took all our trucks. So what we did is we ended up at some chateau someplace, and we just parked there while they used our trucks until they got to the point where they needed us again. Then they gave us back the trucks and we moved out again. And in those time periods, what you did, or what for us happened, is that for 5th Corps, in that period where we stopped and waited, very famous wine chateau. And what happened is that everybody in the Corps troops ended up with 20 bottles of wine. And I'll tell you, that makes you a little bit sick, because you're not smart enough not to drink it. And then when the time came to move out, why, they found that they still had a lot of wine yet, so they gave us 20 more bottles of wine. Now, if you can imagine everybody in the Corps troops with 20 bottles of wine, you had more sick people and more drunk people than you could shake a stick at. And when you moved up and your guides that went out in front of you and that were at a corner and they direct you to go like this, you know, this guy be standing there with a bottle of wine in his hand. And when he used up his bottle, somebody from the truck would hand him another one.
How much confidence did you have in the other folks?
Oh, that was all right. They were all, most of those guys were from our own outfit, so we had plenty of confidence in them, even though they were loaded. But after you ran out of that, that was the last time. But that was a heck of an experience.
I imagine so.
Yeah.
Speaking of heck of an experience, have we missed anything that, oh, I haven't asked the questions to bring you to that point, anything that really, you know, certainly a lifetime of experiences in a short amount of time, anything that we missed?
I don't think so. I'll explain something about the Fire Direction Center. You worked 24 hours a day, so you had 2 crews. One crew was on 12 hours. The other crew was on 12 hours. Your counterpart was responsible for digging your foxhole if you were working. If I was not working, I was responsible for digging the foxhole for my other friend. If you moved while you were on duty and you went from your 12 hours into the next 12 hours, you just stayed on. And there were occasions when we moved where you'd be on for maybe 36 hours. But you got used to it, and they had a lot of coffee, and it wasn't that bad. And you certainly learned to depend on your counterperson, because he was the one that you buddied up with during the war. And you formed a relationship with him that you never forgot. I mean, I kept in touch with him long after the war was over.
What was his name?
His name was Cohen. He was a Jewish guy. Very nice guy. He ended up as a truck driver after the war was over. Lived in, where was it? Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, I think it was.
The awards you received, the medals you received.
I only got one.
I saw a couple. Well, the whole 5 battle stars. I mean, what do you feel like you did to earn this, to deserve?
The Bronze Star, Bronze Star they handed out like nickels. The reason I got the Bronze Star was because I was in the Fire Direction Center. One of my jobs was to keep track of all the maps and all the classified stuff. And I did that the whole doggone time we were in action. And that's what they gave me the doggone thing for. It wasn't because I was brave or anything like that. It was just I did what I was supposed to do.
Do you think in the course of all this you had to be brave, though, to live it every day?
I don't know. We got strafed. We got bombed. We've got counter battery fire. You got scared a lot. You got scared a lot when your own Air Force bombed you. You also got scared a lot when your own Air Force strafed you. I don't know. I don't know about being brave. I don't. It never occurred to me.
To kind of finish up, I'm sure you are aware that the purpose of this is that it's kind of for history's sake and for education.
Yeah.
War is different now. Do you think that people today, what should people understand about what you and other people in the service in World War II experienced?
You wasted 5 years of your life. You had something that you really had to do. You and 16 million other guys took part in World War II. I don't know that I really gave it that much thought, if you want the honest truth.
Did you say at the beginning there that you wasted 5 years of your life?
Well, you lost 5. I wouldn't say wasted. You lost 5 years of your life.
Was it worth it to you?
Yes. I wouldn't have traded that for anything in the world.
That's all the questions I have, unless Mike, do you have anything?
Not really.
Okay. If you feel that we've covered everything, then I think we're through. But if you have anything else you think I or anybody else ought to know.
No.
Okay.
You know, I got married in the service.
You mentioned that. Tell me, and you were 27?
What happened is that I had met my wife over in the States, and she was a nurse, and she joined the Army so that she could come over after I went over. She came over to England, and I saw her 1 week before I went in the sausage. And then when you were in the sausage, you couldn't see anybody, you couldn't talk to anybody, you had no telephone communication or anything. We had applied to get married, went all the way up to ETO headquarters, came back, said you could get married on the 6th of June. And you know where I was on the 6th of June. What happened was that I was scheduled to come back with the 1st Army, first ones getting passes back to the UK. And that was supposed to be in the 15th or 16th of December. Well, the bulge started, so that blew that. So I finally ended up coming back with the first group that came back to England in February. And in February I ended up getting married.
So what's your anniversary?
20th of February.
1944.
45, I'm sorry, 45.
And what's your wife's name?
Nancy. She was the first lieutenant, and I was a sergeant. And I was a T4, and I had to have written permission to be seen with her even after we got married.
Carry that with you all the time?
Yes, you did.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're through.
That's about it. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.